All right, this is the Matrexit discussion group here. This is Brian Parker, and we have somebody that's been a guest with us before, Mr. Micah Dank, who's done his Down the Rabbit Hole series, and we're just kind of chit-chatting about some of these rabbit holes right now. So, how are you doing, Micah?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing awesome, doing awesome. We've been kind of chit-chatting about the fictional entity, or as the revisers of UCC9 refer to it as. They talk to people about it being an organization, and that's what they refer to it as. So, in my documents, that's what I've done as well, as I've referred to it as an organization when I did my resignation, as far as representing it, and not just called it an organization or referred to it as an organization, but also used that registration number that is commonly on the top right hand side of the certificate of live birth. That's its identifying number. It's the first number it ever got.
Right.
So anyway,
Now I have a
so
question
yeah,
for you. Let's just keep going with some stuff.
yeah.
I heard somewhere that utilities are already paid for. In fact, when they charge us, they're double dipping. Is that true?
I've heard that talked about as well. And what they're supposed to be, it's supposed to be a block grant. And they have things that, they like to district things and stuff like that. And so they'll have like a section or a block, and they'll have block grants for that section. And according to the theory, is that those utilities through that block grant are already paid for. And then by you paying your utility bill is just kind of, like you said, double dipping or siphoning money back off from you as well.
Right. So how would you be able to access that so you don't have to pay the utilities anymore?
Well, I go about utilities in a totally different way because when I started looking at things, what I saw is the way that we trap ourselves in life are through our contracts, and uh, the contract makes the law. I think people realize that, and that's really what courts do. All they are doing is enforcing the contracts that you've become a party to. And so the way I structure things is if you're going to say you're going to be renting, and there's another way you can do it as well if you own a home. But say, for instance, in the situation of renting, is that you just kind of change that contract with the renter a little bit, and you have that actually be absorbed into your rent payment, so that you
Right.
don't have a utility bill in your name.
Oh, nice. Okay. And we were chatting off radio before. We were talking about how to opt out of taxes.
Right.
Right. Right. So basically, you want to explain what you basically did and how to go about doing that?
Well, what I did is completely different than what a lot of people can do. Well, anybody can do it, but I've known of people close to me who opted out of taxes through a particular form through the IRS. I think, what would you say it was, like a W-8,
There's a
something like that?
W-8. It's called a Benny or a beneficiary. So
Right.
basically, when you start working at a job, what they do is it's more of an inheritance. I think if I'm to understand that, basically what they do is they don't charge you federal or state. You being in Florida, you don't have state to begin with. But for us in New York, which sucks, where you have such a high state tax as well, they don't charge that. Now the question is, most people don't figure this out right away, right? Most people don't figure this
Right.
out right away. And you said that Social Security is different. So I think what happens is Social Security takes your 5 highest years of salary and they base your Social Security income based off of that. So let's say you've been in the workforce 10 years, you have your 5 highest years, and then you decide to opt out of taxes. If you're not doing that, if you're not paying into Social Security, can you access it at the end of your life?
Well, if you haven't been paying into it, I would say, well, there will be a way of accessing it, because there's people that, let's say, for instance, I had a grandmother She died when she was roughly 100 years old, and she had never held a job that I was ever aware of in her entire life. She was always the homemaker. But though she
Mm,
did, they do have, a subsidy for people like that, although it's going to be much lower than what you would get if you had been paying in through your
mhm,
life.
mhm.
One of
And
the
you were
things I
also
would
set. Yeah. Sorry. Go
I
on.
was going to say, one of the things I'd recommend to people if they want to go down that avenue and things like that is, they can't say, well, I'm just going to wait for the whole retirement idea years and years from now. What they should be doing now is, and it's the same thing that I recommend to people with vehicles, what they should be doing now is take whatever money would normally be going in to retirement and instead put that into a Roth IRA. A
Right.
Roth IRA specifically because a Roth IRA isn't going to tax you when the money is pulled out because it sees that money as having already been taxed before you put the money in.
Correct.
And I recommend doing the same thing, people like with cars. If you get your car paid off, awesome. Don't go out and buy another one. Continue making car payments. Open a Christmas Club account where you can go and
Uh
pull
huh.
money out like in November or December every year and make car payments to yourself. And eventually you're going to have money built up there that when it comes time for a new car, you're going to already have the money.
Right. That's a great idea. Yeah. Um. So what was I going to ask? I Can you explain, because we had sort of touched on it and then we started to record. Can you explain why the status when you go to court, why the prosecutor has to bring a checkbook with him?
All right. I've heard this talked about numerous times, different sources. I have zero evidence of it. All right.
Okay.
Other than what I've seen actually myself take place. But the purpose behind it is each court case will have something similar to what's called like a sum certain, which is the
Uh-huh.
value of the case. And there's supposed to be bonds and things like that running in the background also regarding the case. And if the prosecutor doesn't win it, well, guess what? The court is losing out on that money. And so that money is going to have to come from somewhere. So that's would be the idea behind him having to bring his checkbook. In my situation, I was facing one time felony charges that started at 5 years and ended up quickly going to 15 years I was going to have to serve. And I fought it for a year. And at the end of the year, it was finally time. It had to be taken care of. And so they made me an offer in court. I denied the offer. They made me a second offer. I denied it. The judge got upset and said, listen, I got a full docket today. I'm going to move you over to another courtroom. I was like, okay. And so I followed a bailiff over to this other courtroom. And we walked in, and the bailiff turned on the lights. There was nobody in there. And it ended up just being me, the attorney that I had back at that time, back in the day, and then the prosecutor. And once again, there was two more offers made. I denied both of them. The judge got red in the face. He started making all these threats. I think the counsel I had could tell I was getting ready to say something, and he just whispered to me, "Stand down." So I shut my mouth. And at the end of it, the judge said, "Get out of my courtroom." And so we walked out, and I remember I turned to the counsel and I said, "Well, what now?" And counsel said, "Go and sin no more." But I think that was part of the reason why they moved it over to that other courtroom. One, they didn't want the audience, because that's all a courtroom is an audience to keep the sheeple
Correct.
scared, right? So they didn't want the audience to see this go down. And on top of it, they are probably going to try and somewhat squeegee it from the record to save the state and the prosecutor's butt a little bit, if you know what I mean. And that
Yeah.
would be referring to that checkbook they're supposed to carry.
Right. So two questions then. They're unrelated. Maybe they're related. I don't know. If you do not give into the fictional identity and become the trustee, right? They kick you out, and then when they kick you out, you're immediately arrested again. What is that about?
I think every situation is different. I mean, I've heard that said before, basically where somebody they don't want to basically like claim the name or whatever, and
Right.
judges will say, well, either you're him or you're the trustee. You know what I mean? Kind of trying to give
Yeah.
a way out there. But either way, you're still locked into the position of liability, even as the trustee. I mean, that's all part of the trustee principal relationship. Um, and so, yeah, I have heard that happen before where people will walk out, they get rearrested, and the charges is an FOA, a failure to appear.
Right. So then I have another question too. I was told, or I heard somewhere, that if the judge calls a recess, if you don't do that, when they come back in, they change the law. You have common law, maritime law, and religious law. Is that true?
I've heard that claim, but from what I've studied, what I've kind of wrapped my mind around, I think, is that, see, prior to the USA starting up, um, and this all happened about the same time in England as well, is that they had difficulties within the courts because you had your statutory court, the court of the king, and then you had
Right.
your ecclesiastical court, which was the church, right?
Correct. Yes.
And one of their problems was that somebody didn't like the judgment they got in one court, say the statutory, they'd run over to the court of equity. They'd run over to the ecclesiastical court, to get a different judgment or find a different judgment there. And so in the USA, if people study this, you'll find where Supreme Court has stated that both equity and common law have been merged in the USA. So they're basically saying both the statutory and the courts of equity are kind of one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Gotcha.
Now, I hear a lot of people want to say they want to like invoke the equity court and things like that. This can be dangerous though. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Is because regarding a statutory matter, it is laid out pretty much bang, 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 exactly what the courts have to follow. Even like you've heard of sentencing guidelines. That's all part
Right.
of it. Well, if you're invoking only equity and you're getting only an equity court, well, you better hope that that judge, his wife didn't get drunk last night, kick the crap out of him, and make him sleep in the car all night long because he's going to be coming out of court in a bad mood. And so now, if you're in an equity situation, guess what? This is where they get to use what's called discretion. That's when you're hearing them say, the court's discretion or the judge's discretion. They're employing equity side there. So if you've got a judge that's really in a very, very bad mood for one reason or another, you might not want him in an equity position. You might want him just following the statutes because he might take out some of his wrath on you.
So, how does the law change? Because when you see Biden up there at the White House, right? Or you see Obama, you see them all there, and in the camera frame is the gold fringed flag. How does it change from? And I've seen the peacetime flag; it looks nothing like the American flag that we all think. Um, I guess this is an at war flag. Is that what it is?
A lot of people want to say that. To me, I look at it as really being the corporate banner, is what I would call it.
That's a good. That's a good way. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, for the
Um,
corporation,
that,
the United States Corporation from 1871.
right, right, and not from 1871, but from 1789. A lot of people want to say 1871. That was when the city of Washington D.C. became incorporated. Okay,
Right.
and that right there is where the jurisdiction begins and ends, really federally, other than outlying territories or buildings that the federal government owns, and pertaining to their federal employees as well. Um, so there's interesting story, and this happened prior to the internet going online, so to speak. But this was with the Montana Freeman, and I really wish that the
Is this the
internet was
for?
up
Is this
and
the forager for the berries?
No. This was a kind of, well, it relates, but it's kind of a different situation. It was their court situation.
Oh, okay.
And I wish people at that time had cell phones and been able to record and everything like that, because it would have been a great teachable moment, because that's what the Montana Freemen were complaining about. They're complaining about the gold fringe flag, and the judge is wearing that black robe, he's a priest of Saturn, all that kind of stuff. And so the judge said, okay, hold on, let's go into recess. He went into recess. He went back into chambers. He took off his robe. So he was just wearing, a suit jacket, and he had the flags all removed from the courtroom. And then he went back out and sat down and re-adjourned the court and said, okay, everything's gone. Everything's taken down. Let's hold court. Now what? And people were kind of dumbfounded as to what to do. And because their authority doesn't come from the robe, their authority doesn't come from the flag, it doesn't come from the seal that's up on the wall. That's
Right.
not where their authority is derived at. So, I thought that was just kind of an interesting story. It's like, okay, fine. They can take all that stuff down and not have it in the courtroom. It's not going to change the situation that you're in. You're in an administrative court.
Right. Wow.
And that's
And
why
this was
they're able to get away with doing things probably like on Zoom as well, because it's just administrative. That's all it is.
right. Wow.
I, early on when I started researching stuff and studying things, I didn't have any real good experience with court, at least in a situation where I could be maybe a moving party, for instance. And so I let a couple smaller credit cards lapse and let them go to third party debt collectors. I mean, I just sat back and watched the mail and waited for it to happen. And eventually, sure enough, they sent an agent for service of process to my house to get me to go to court. And I went to court, and one time I remember court was live. I was looking through some paperwork for something the judge had asked for. And in the meantime, she said to me, she said, I'm not sure if you know who I am here. Do you know who I am in this room? And just without even batting an eye or thinking about it, I just blurted it out while I was looking through my paperwork. I just blurted out, yeah, you're the administrator for these proceedings. And she just shut right up, because it's the truth.
Right.
I think she was expecting me to say, with a quivering voice, oh, you're the judge for the state, you're going to throw the book at me. And, I think that's what she was kind of looking for. But,
Right.
and I really say that the true solution, I mean, people say, like you talk about Santos Bonacci and the promissory note in court and different things like that. And there is nothing foolproof. I'll tell people that right now. If everybody wants a silver bullet, you're not going to find one. But the closest thing I've found is, since the state created this juridic entity, which is organized, evidenced by that registration called a certificate of live birth, that's when it's created. Even vital statistics will tell you this. That's what the citizen is. It's that piece of paper. The best thing you can do is just not be a representative or an agent for that organization they created. Bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I've had two situations over a year's span of time here where I was pulled over, no driver's license, registration, insurance, and whatever else they wanted to say, if it was initially because of speeding or tinted windows or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But nothing resulted from that. I didn't go to jail. There was no ticket. But anywhere else, I mean, that's a go directly to jail card right there. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I remember the first time it happened, I was like, oh, this is it. I'm probably going to get nailed here. And the officer came back to the car and said, okay, you just be safe, and walked away. And I'm thinking, what in the world just happened here? And they've got authority over what they created, which is that juridic entity. And if you're not the agent for it, you're not representing it, that,
So
that
how
kind of puts things
can
in
you
mind.
explain to people like me who have, I would say, like an intermediate level of understanding of all the things you're talking about, how to go about and opt out of that to get into a situation where you don't need insurance, you don't need this, you don't need that.
Right. Well, I would say, I looked around in the beginning for resignation of office letters. I just looked at different things, and then found different states also supplied them as well. And I just looked at the basic information that was needed and said, fine, I'll just do my own. And any correspondence I've ever done, which hasn't been a whole lot, has really basically been one page,
Uh-huh.
and I just wrote on there, basically, however you want to say it, as many ways as you can say it. I rescind, refuse, blah, 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 to be a representative or agent for your state created organization. And I listed the file number on the top right corner of the certificate of live birth for, the identifying marker for that
So where
organization.
do you go to get a certificate of live birth?
It comes from the State Department of Health. There's other companies. There's one company that is authorized to do it as a middleman. They're called Vital Check. Their name sounds a little bit like Vital Statistics. They're not Vital Statistics. They're just a private company, and it's going to cost a little bit extra for it. But yeah, and then what I recommend after that, and then think about it this way: would you buy a car off from somebody that just gave you a copy of the certificate of title? Absolutely not.
Right.
Well, the only thing that you get from the Department of Health or from the state is a copy of the certificate of live birth. Even
Right.
if it's a certified copy, it's just a copy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you go to 28 United States Code 1733, it tells you in there in the second paragraph that properly authenticated documents are observed as the original. And so I did the double authentication, first through the state, then the feds, for that document. And when it comes back from the feds, it has and colors mean things, tan colored cover sheet, and it comes with full faith and credit of the United States of America. And it also starts out with the statement, to whom these presents may come, greetings. And one of the things I did is I looked up that statement, and I saw through history it's been used a lot, and it really always pertains to a transfer of property or an interest in property.
Uh-huh. Wow. Okay. Because
So
I'm
that,
gonna do that at some point. But let me ask you a question then.
yeah,
How does it work? How does it work if you get into like a car accident, if you're not covered by insurance? How does that work?
right. I don't recommend to anybody to not have insurance, and because really, if you look, people want to say the banks run the world. Really, it's not. It's the insurance companies that run the world. They're the ones even behind the banks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and in law, it's called the Financial Responsibility Act. Okay, as far as a requirement to have insurance on a vehicle. Um, and if people kind of wonder about the insurance and doubt that, I'm sorry. You look at everything, like we had mentioned, court cases, them being bonded, everything, construction sites. You've got your payment bond, bid bond, replevin bond, payments bond. There's all these bonds running behind the scenes, and bonds are all written by insurance companies. And that's really what the insurance is on a vehicle. In a way, it's a form of a bond, a surety. That's actually behind the scenes placed into something else where there's investments and profits made and things like that. But yeah, I'll tell you what, my last interaction that I had with law enforcement, the officer actually I had my door open, I'm sitting in the front seat, and he kind of knelt down next to the car. And he smiled and looked at me and he said, listen, Brian, he said, I'll tell you what, we don't really care about driver's license. We don't really care about insurance. I mean, we don't really care about registration. He said, but please make sure and have some form of insurance. And I said to him, I said, I totally comprehend that. I said, that's due to the Financial Responsibility Act. He goes, oh, you've had this problem before. I said, no, I haven't had this problem before. I said, I just kind of know the moving parts. I know what's being
Right.
implemented here. And he said, yeah. He said, that's exactly the reason why. And, and it is just wise to do anyway, unless You happen to be a multimillionaire and you can, pay somebody to make them whole again in case an accident occurs because accidents happen. That's why they're called accidents. You didn't do it on purpose. It just happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
There can be other factors at play, but it's smart to have because, Lord forbid, could you imagine, something small and stupid happening and somebody being grossly injured due to it? And
Right.
you have no way to take care of them or make them whole again. I mean, back thousands of years ago, you would go and join their family and be a servant in their family the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, we don't do that anymore. We have insurance for it. So to me, it's just smart. I mean, could you live with yourself if someone else had a life-altering injury, due to something that you were involved with? I think it would be hard
Right.
to do. Even if you were totally innocent of doing anything wrong, it still should hang in your subconscious. If it doesn't, there's something wrong with you.
I got you. So moving away from this for a little bit, have you been um, following my posts on astrotheology on Facebook? Have you
Yeah,
seen any of my work before? What do you think?
yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. I've got a few of your books at home. In fact, my mom came down about a year ago, and I said, "Oh," because she loves to read. I said, "Oh, here, I've got reading material for you, since I know you can't bring a lot on the airplane." So she went through them as well, and yeah, yeah. So I recommend them to people. Absolutely, get the books, and you were talking about. Are you talking about possibly doing another one on the Book of Mormon as well?
Yes, I have. I have recently done it, but I only have the first book done.
Cool.
I only have the first book done so far, and it's not very long, but it's based on astrotheology as well. Um, I can send you the link, or we could do another podcast at some point on Zoom, and I could show you my screen so that people could watch this, and then I could show you my presentation, which I would love to do. Um,
You can
because
share
it's
screen on here as well.
right, but I'm on my phone. I'm not on
Oh,
my
okay.
computer.
All right.
Um, but I will definitely get back with you, and we'll set up a day. It takes 45 minutes, 40 minutes, not long. But it's all based on that stuff. Every book that I touch, every ancient book that I touch, it's not just the Bible that's an astrology book. It's the Gnostic texts. It's the Book of Mormon. It's the Quran. It's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's the Enuma Elish. That's Babylonian. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's Sumerian. It's the Code of Hammurabi, which is where all basically law comes from. I've traced
Right.
it back to the Code of Hammurabi. It's all based on this one thing, and my publicist is pitching on Monday to TV producers because I had the first book translated with the screenwriter into a TV pilot, or the first half of the first book, I should say. So hopefully this gets on TV soon and get to wake people up. It's a hell of a way to red pill people, though, because you're reading it, you get into the storyline, and then you forget how much you learned.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things too that I like about your books is that you wrote them from like a fictional standpoint. Because if you can't come out saying, "Oh, this here's the facts," you know what? Unfortunately, nobody wants to read the facts anymore. But they love fiction, and through fiction,
Yeah,
they can actually learn and absorb things.
yeah, that's the idea. I studied, I have an English degree. I studied like Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. I studied Philip K. Dick and all that shit. I studied, Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I've studied Animal Farm, 1984. All this stuff, and I noticed that they all tell truth through their fiction.
Yep.
So I decided that's what I was going to do, and I was just going to put as much esoteric knowledge in these books as is written as Dan Brown thrillers, and
Right.
he's a huge influence in my life, Dan Brown. With like the cryptograms and the puzzles and everything, I just find that so mentally stimulating. So I wanted to do that for people too. So I kind of bit off his style a little bit. You throw in a little Chuck Palahniuk in there, um, and you get my new style. And my books, my first children's book is coming out in a day or two, and 6 of the books are out. It's called Into the Rabbit Hole series by Micah Dank. Everybody that's listening, if you want to go pick it up, or reach out to me on social media. I sell signed copies too. I sell thousands from the house. They're doing well. They're doing well.
And I'll put your YouTube
yeah.
channel in the description box of this as well.
So people can see my work. Watch the introduction video. Watch my introduction to astrotheology video. And if you like it, reach out to me on social media if you want to get the books. Or you could just go to Amazon, but I know people in our community don't like Amazon. And, I don't either, really. But unfortunately, it kind of swallowed up the entire book industry.
Yeah, the past couple of years, I think they've swallowed up a lot. In fact, during the harshest part of the lockdown, they had a record-setting week.
Yep. People weren't leaving. They were just ordering stuff to the house. In fact, it's beyond that, because I think people in your generation, right? The women at home, they used to get pregnant by the milkman, and now it's the Amazon delivery driver.
Right. Well, I don't know about my generation. I don't think I'm that old. We didn't have a milkman, but
Your parents' generation.
Yeah, definitely my parents' generation. In fact, there's some stories very similar to that in the family. I think it kind of reminds me of interesting that people look at like Ancestry.com and things like that, and there's a story came out not long ago about somebody that was doing a search, and I think their sister was as well, and all of a sudden they discovered they weren't really sisters. And then it came out that way back in the day, mom, who is since gone, looks like she might have had a relationship with somebody she was employed with for about a month and a half.
Wow.
And
I read something that said
that.
I read something that said that like 30% of pregnancies, the woman doesn't know who the father is.
Wow.
Worldwide.
Wow. Well, and we were talking about court earlier, and this is one of the things regarding that whole situation I like to bring up once in a while. There was an ongoing court struggle to try and have, I think it was like Jesse James' body exhumed. And you think back to like Maury Povich, you are not the daddy, you know what I mean? And all that stuff. And I remember watching
just retired, by the way.
Oh, did he? What?
He literally just retired like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I've had some, I'll say like secondhand relationship type things with him, and he's not a good guy. Anyway,
no.
In this court situation, the judge said he would give them permission to exhume the body, but under one stipulation. They had to get DNA results from 2 of his female relatives. And when I heard that, I just started laughing because I'm going, oh my gosh, they can only get it through the mitochondrial DNA. Okay.
Right.
So when they're going and swabbing Billy Bob's mouth to see if he's the baby daddy, no. That's not how you find out. You should be swabbing the mouth of his sister and his mother. The judge laid it right out in court there. I don't know how many people caught it. Not very many, probably. But yeah, the judge said we need DNA of 2 female relatives.
That's funny.
So yeah, it's all covered through the mitochondrial DNA. And if I was listening to a rabbi being interviewed here a few years ago, and one of the questions that was asked him was, how is somebody Jewish? And he said, oh, well, it used to be if your mother was Jewish, you were Jewish. And now it's like, well, if one of your parents is Jewish, you might be Jewish. Or now it's even transferred to, if you're a practicing Jew, then yeah, you are a Jew. But I'm sure, if you went right to a rabbi today and said, seriously, who is really a Jew? They would come right out, flat out say, it depends on the mom. Bottom line. Why? It's the mitochondrial DNA. That's what follows the bloodline.
But at the same time, I Yeah, it's the bloodline, but that doesn't transfer a faith, a thought process.
Oh no, absolutely not, absolutely not. But in their eyes, I mean, they're seen as more of a people or a chosen people, and so to them, it is a blood situation. You know what I mean? But no, I'd agree. It doesn't transfer a belief system,
Right.
and I find it interesting if people go, you hear about every president is related, and you can go to charts and look at charts on it, and they all basically go back to King Charlemagne, who
Charlemagne,
was,
yeah.
yeah, and Charlemagne was, if anybody's studied it, he was, um, how do I put this nicely? He shouldn't been sitting on the throne he was. I'll just say that. Anyway, it all goes back to him. But though you look at these bloodlines and they're all spread out, it looks like the root system of a forest. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that because that's all following the paternal bloodline, the father. If you go and follow the maternal bloodline, the female bloodline, you can go back previous to, I want to say it's 1020, 1030 of the Garcenda family.
Really.
And from the Garcendas, she had three daughters, Joanna, Anna Maria, and maybe a Marie. Okay. And even those three sisters, you can look at their bloodlines and they all kind of come back down into one. And down at the bottom of that, actually today, you see the Queen of England there at the bottom of that. Now,
Right.
I went and took the Garcenda bloodline and I traced it back like another about 200 or 300 years prior to Garcenda. But I really believe that this is the bloodline that they are following. And if you followed it even further back, um, you might end up, at a manger in Bethlehem or something like that. At least I'm sure that's their belief.
Hello? Sorry, so the Garcinda bloodline, go on.
Yeah, yeah. I saw you kind of bounced off there for a second, but yeah. So I really think if you follow the Garcenda bloodline, like I said, I traced it back another 200 years from what I saw. I traced it back to like 850 AD, something like that. But I'm sure if you
Uh-huh.
could even keep going further back, like I said, you'd end up basically at a manger in Bethlehem, possibly, or at least that's what
Yeah.
the elite would like to think.
Yep. Absolutely. But I talk about this in my first book. Do you remember when I talked about the pedigree collapse theory?
Right,
That's what it basically
right.
is. So for people who are listening, the pedigree collapse theory basically says, you're one person. You have two parents. You have four grandparents. You have eight great grandparents. You double. You keep going back. You keep going back. Well, the total amount of people that have ever been estimated on Earth has been 100 billion people. If you go back to 840 AD, right, with this doubling, that brings you to 130 billion people. And what basically boils down to is that there's no way that works. That process doesn't work. So what they basically say is that you there's a lot of incest that happens that ends up
You think?
narrowing
No.
that narrows the pedigree. It's called the pedigree collapse theory. Exactly. And in fact, if you have two parents that are from the same country, let's say two parents from Italy, if you go back 7 or 8 generations, they probably share a common relative.
Yep.
So
I know.
that's
I know.
yeah,
Going back, I think like 3 or 4 generations, my mother and father um, have a common relative as well.
yeah, because there's no other way that it works.
Well, and if you even go back to what has claimed to have been a practice of the kings, is that the
Right.
kings, in order to, have an authorized marriage, that the king wanted the first go around at the bride. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he
Absolutely.
wanted his seed there. And
Right.
I've said this for a long time, and a lot of people laughed at me. And then here, like 4 or 5 years ago, um, a university in Britain came out with it, and that was that, you know, like an ex-girlfriend I had, she has a daughter now, but she told me, she said, I always wanted to have a child by you. And I said,
Yeah.
well, you kind of do. And she said, what do you mean? I said, some of my DNA is in your daughter. She's like, what do you mean? So I had to explain it to her. This is the reason why a pet owner, if they have like a prize dog, they get so mad if their dog gets knocked up by one of the other, you know, uh, runts or whatever in the freaking
Right.
neighborhood,
Right.
you know, because that other dog's DNA is now going to be in their prize dog.
Right.
And so that is going to pollute the DNA of the future babies that come from their prized dog,
That's correct.
make
That's
make them
100%
less
correct.
valuable. Right. And then, like I said here a few years ago, they came out, a university in Britain came out and said, yeah, they said that DNA from previous lovers of a female will also show up in her offspring that she has by some other male. And the same thing
Right.
happens in humans, that happens in animals.
Right. We're no different. It's
Uh,
true.
The only difference is we're sentient. But then again, I wonder about that sometimes too.
When you think about your average dumbass motherfucker in the world, just your average moron, and then you think that half the people are dumber than him.
Well, and that's one of the things most people don't realize is that just over 50% of the population in the USA are functioning illiterates.
Yep.
And
Mostly in blue states.
I had this conversation actually with a ex-police officer the other day, and he was telling me about a court case that he had to go back and give testimony at. And he said that when the jury came back with their verdict, he was just like shocked. He couldn't understand it. And I told him, I said, listen, I said, I firmly believe that the majority of people today cannot conjugate a thought or formulate serious reasoning in their mind. And he says, Brian,
Mm-hmm.
he says, you are absolutely correct. He says, we laid everything out perfect for these people. And how they came to the idea they did, he said, I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, it's true. Not only that, but there's people that exist that don't have an inner monologue. No, no, no. I
Yeah,
mean that. I mean that literally. There's people that just see like shapes and colors in their head, like animals. I
it's
forget.
called aphantasia.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, they
Yep.
can't. They don't have an inner thought process.
Well, and here's the thing, if you ask them, they cannot actually picture their mother in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
but they know her if they see her,
Right.
and
It's
to
almost like a
me,
form of memory loss.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of things I've kind of wondered about people that have aphantasia, and it's interesting if you watch any interviews with people that have this, every single one of them will tell you that they think that they are way smarter than everybody else.
Well, that's everybody's sin to bear. Everybody
Uh,
thinks that they're bright.
well, I don't think I'm smarter than everybody
Even
else,
even the
but they,
people that are out. Yeah,
uh, it's just, I don't get it.
I don't know, but this has been absolutely great. And let's do the Book of Mormon. We'll do a Zoom session, and we can put it on your website. Um, coming up, just reach out to me, and we'll do
Sure.
this another time.
Yep. Just tell me when you want to do it, Micah, and yeah, we'll cover that. I think the Book of Mormon is really interesting. I think if people look at that, also not just the Mormon Church, also look at like the Seventh Day Adventist.
Right.
They're gonna start seeing some parallels in a lot of things going on
Oh
there.
yeah. They all tie back to the ancient religions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The mystery religions and things like that. Exactly. I think the so-called Christian community today has kind of been in the dark regarding just about all of this.
I don't even know if they could understand the kind of stuff that I put down, the kind of stuff that I talk about. Like it's just so mind blowing to them.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
have to take off though, so I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Absolutely, brother. You have a good day. And like I tell people every time I do a podcast, learn who you are, where you're really from, and where you're really at, because that's where you've been deceived. Catch you, brother.
Yep. Take care.